Hi, everyone. So, today I am going to be discussing the type of Elon Musk with my good friend Trey.
Yes, sir.
And as some of you may have watched the debate on Elon Musk, the result was sort of inconclusive. I think actually more people thought LIE than ILE overall from that. At the same time, a lot of people had very different opinions. It also seems to me that over time, a number of people have gone back to thinking ILE as being more likely. We've seen some posts on the Facebook group by some people, Leah as a clear example, which has had a very large number of comments. So it felt to me like there was an appetite to revisit the issue, to see if there's anything else we could discuss about this. And yeah, Trey is certainly being the big sport and coming on here. And as he said in his own words, putting aside any pride, being open to new ideas, new perspectives. Yeah. And I will try to do the same as well and see if we can come to some sort of conclusion. But yeah, so Trey, one thing I'd like to ask you is, because I watched back through the debate, going back, but are there any new points from you in terms of typing for Elon Musk as LIE, or have you also or any other opinions or takes in general since that debate?
No, I mean, I think he presents it pretty clearly in his actions and just in the information you can find from him online in regard to how he handles different aspects of his life. I haven't really been thinking a lot about it or trying to contribute anything new in that regard. I think mainly this is more of an opportunity to just kind of open up to the alternatives so that it's not a debate format, so we can actually try to get down to the actual type rather than, just kind of throwing it at each other,
Makes sense. Oh, what's that? Derek says I need to take to the rate. I mean, he's just kidding. Fine. No, Zara told me today, your beard is uneven. You need to trim it. So I spent some time trimming my beard just to make sure it's as symmetrical as I can make it. But I don't think I'm very good at it. I'm getting better. And this
is actually the first time I've grown mine out, so it's nothing impressive.
Is it? Yeah, I think it's quite good. I think it's quite good. Yeah. No, I think it's good. Yeah, I don't know. It's still up in the air whether this will be seen for the wedding or not, when the wedding finally does come around after the COVID virus is no longer enough of a source of fear for people.
Yeah, that's gotta be fun.
Yes. And goodness, Trey, you've had some really tough time as well in Texas, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been exciting. A whole week of no shower is so great.
Gracious.
Yeah, well, no water, no electricity. Yeah, it wasn't fun. And now they're fixing my wall because there was like a leak. So.
Oh, goodness gracious! You said there was a storm.
Yeah, it was like. Yeah, I mean, it was a snowstorm. Texas isn't used to that, but
yeah,
it's funny to see because Texans are so resilient that like now that they've been caught off guard, they're so pissed off. They're all like getting ready for the next time.
Oh, goodness. And just having all your power, having to know access to water.
Yeah.
Very tough times, I must say. But you look amazing for someone who hasn't showered in a week.
No, not now. I'm good now.
Okay.
Good to hear. It was a while ago. Oh man.
Okay. And is Damon well?
Yeah, he's doing good.
Okay, good. Okay, so what I sort of at the time of the debate, I was not firmly in a position.
Oh, okay.
I think I become more strongly inclined towards ILE over time. And I thought that the basis of my viewpoint was that, yes, looking at sources, you can get the impression of LIE for Musk. But I was looking at, okay, what narrative seems to best describe the broadest variety of data points we can find. And yes, if you take a selection, certainly during the time of 2008, you could get the picture of the guy who works himself nearly to death, intensely hard, intensely driven, working every single moment of the day, sleeping on the floor of his office, not having time for anything else, and nearly being in tears from how hard he has worked. I remember the interview where he was talking about, it's like a baby. My companies are like a baby. You have to feed the baby. And even if it nearly kills you or something like that. So, and then also the picture of him as being quite a tough boss, someone who could fire you very quickly, who demands certain standards and levels, and if it's not met, he'll be very quick to fire. And almost taken to an extreme level, like not even allowing some of his employees to take time with their families, as we'll say a wedding or a birth, almost not very uncompromising in that respect. I have had difficulty beyond that maintaining the narrative of LIE, especially in recent events online, events on Twitter specifically, and also various appearances in YouTube, on YouTube, looking, for instance, at meme reviews. Also, his changing style of dress. We used to see him quite a bit in these sort of ill-fitting suits, and he's become more and more casual over time, more willing to wear just a t-shirt, even in a more formal
That's what I would do if I were super rich. Just act like I'm homeless. You know, it's you don't have anything to prove it at that point. You know.
Yeah, and also the idea. Speaking of homes, the fact that he is selling almost all of his possessions, not all of it, but a vast majority of his possessions, which to one person's perspective could look like what Bill Gates asked multi-billionaires to do, to give almost 99% of their wealth to various charities. So
I was kind of curious because I forgot why he did that, why he was selling houses, but at least just from a quick Google search, it was saying he was just doing it to build as much capital for his to fund his Mars colony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have to look at it a little bit further while we're talking though, because
I have the clip which could also help for that. So let me. I found the precise point where he answers Joe Rogan's question about that.
Okay.
So let me see if I can get that up.
Was this that one interview? This is the first one? Didn't they do a second one?
Yeah, they've done a few. I remember his 2018 interview. He was very pessimistic and seemingly depressed about AI. Now, here's no, it's not. Is this one or is it? I think it's the other one. Let me just stop sharing just a second and share the other one. Okay, it's this one. Oh, dang, keep on doing that. Right, I'm just gonna. Sorry, I'm gonna share the right one. I'm not used to having it. It's the same video, so I got it 2 different points. So I'll just find it again. Okay, here it is. Right. So here's what Joe Rogan pops a question to him. Let me know if you can hear.
Okay. I can't hear.
Okay. Let me up the volume.
Yeah.
Right. Let's try now.
You could also put on captions.
Oh, that's a good idea. Right.
I can't hear it, but I can read it, so.
Okay.
Attack vector.
Yeah, and so that's what I find is quite interesting. He's sad. One, he's sad about it. He doesn't really want to be getting rid of all this stuff, right? But he also feels as if people can say to him, "You're a billionaire and you got all this rich stuff, so you're greedy and all the rest."
How do you take that?
What was that?
I said, how do you take that?
Well, my impression of that is something which feeds into a pattern I've seen as well. There's an interview going back when he was in tears, not because of his company, but because of his heroes, his astronauts, criticizing the idea of this guy, from a private enterprise taking over what should be, in their mind, the remit of NASA, saying he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And being critical of the idea of what they call mediocrity taking over space exploration. And yeah, it devastated him. And other times he said how comments in public can be hurtful. And I think it comes down to this idea for Musk. He doesn't just say, I don't care what people think about me or say about me. I think he legitimately feels that the public mood, the public resonance around him, he needs it to be positive. And if it's not positive, it hurts him. And he might try to do something about that, even something quite extreme of selling almost all of his possessions. And I should also say later in this very interview, he talked about some of the possessions he would be selling. So so a perfect example is around here. Let me see if I can find it. Hang on. It's it's just here. He turns out he bought the house of Gene Wilder. Now, hang on, let me get to it. Okay. Here we go. Yeah. So he bought this really quirky house from another one of his childhood heroes.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, right? It's quite a whimsical thing to be doing. I know, yes, he's got a lot of money, but it's not necessarily a money thing either. He's got so much money, but the fact that you think, okay, I'm going to buy the house of a guy who was in some of my favorite films, like Gene Wilder worked with Mel Brooks, and Mel Brooks's films like Spaceballs, very important thing for him. That was an Easter egg in his flamethrower reference for merchandising for the Boring company. And
I want to make a comment before
go on.
More information comes out. Yeah, so earlier, what was the previous point? In regard to like how he cares about what other people are thinking, I found it interesting because it kind of seemed to me a lot more like when he got emotional about those things, it was people that he had personally invested value in. You know what I mean? Like these were people that he saw as inspirations. So when they spoke down to him, I think it was hurtful, but I didn't really see that as indicative of like being FE, or in the case of like, people seeing him a certain way due to his due to how much wealth he has, or how many possessions he has. I kind of just think that speaks to his, like, I mean, he literally called it an attack vector. Like they're attacking his character, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying that's what they're doing, right? But it's very possible that's the concern. Is, I mean, at least that's the way that I saw it when I heard.
Right. Yes, he used the word attack vector. Now, I in my view, I think ILEs can be actually quite likely to use words like attack vector on me. Attack, like this is an application of something which is hurtful or forceful against me in some way. I think there's nothing stopping an ILE from saying that. But I think this idea that words can be used against me rather than actual material force. It's not as if people saying bad stuff about him on the internet is going to actually take down his company.
I mean, yeah, I don't think that it's going to take down his company, but I think LIEs are often known to be sensitive, especially when people are talking about their character.
I think when it comes to an LIE, it's not necessarily.
Go either way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, for instance, if we compare this to say like Donald Trump as an example, right? Everyone, regardless of what type you think he is, few people think he's LIE. I think some people do, not many. Most people think SLE, some maybe SEE. But the idea of public portrayal is an important one to him. And he worries a lot about what people are saying about him on social media. He's constantly watching that sort of stuff. It sounds to me like Elon Musk is doing a similar sort of thing. But also around that point of, is it about just people he holds in personally high esteem that he cares about what they think of him? I wonder about that in regards to his relationship with Justine Musk, and how in that situation, if it were the case, I would imagine that the personal relationship comes first. What the person thinks about him comes first. Would he have been so uncomfortable about her grieving the death of their first son, who essentially had an completely unexpected early death of their son, of an infant. And she was quite naturally, as a mother would be, grieving so intensely, so strongly. He wouldn't want her to do it. He didn't want her to be grieving. He felt it was emotionally manipulative to be essentially creating a negative emotional response around him. Now, an LIE, right? I would imagine they would, I think, respect that relationship enough to allow those emotions to come out. And also the thing about the role extroverted ethics, role is quite adaptive to the needs and demands of the situation. I don't think an LIE with role extroverted ethics would refuse to adjust to the mood creation of their closest partner. And when it comes to Musk, it was like, no, this mood, this vibe is too much for me to be able to handle.
I'm curious what he actually said, because when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, well, in regard to like her feeling that way, like I find it very strange when FE valuing types aren't willing to allow someone to express their emotions, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like that's like fundamental to those quadras, or those values, is like I should be able to express, especially with the SE types.
Well, yes, but also when it comes, depending on where extroverted ethics is in the hierarchy. So when it comes to, say, a leading or a mobilizing function, it's inert. And the idea for these types is that they want to sort of decide what the mood's going to be around them. And they're less likely to be willing to put up with a certain mood around them, which they feel is actually against what they'd like. For if we're assuming the ILE typing or an alpha with inert extroverted ethics, it is quite feasible to use that to explain why someone would not be able to put up with a grieving, highly negative emotional atmosphere. And I've known ILEs also become also rebellious against the set mood of a room or group if they themselves aren't even feeling it, or they haven't got any control in terms of what that mood's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's such a, it does feel to some degree like a complete. It's almost like the mood has to be a certain way. The relationship, not even factoring that in.
Did he? What exactly did he say in regard to that? Like, what was the actual?
I got the
event.
Got the article. Let me see if I can get it up here.
And there were people I noticed earlier saying that I was drinking wine. I'm actually drinking a Smirnoff. It's just like, yeah, it's more like I think it's vodka and like flavored. I don't know. Look it up.
Oh no, Trey, you've burst the bubble. People thought you were being very classy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was being classy yesterday. I had a bunch of wine yesterday, and it's actually funny. I told you that this is a little bit off topic, but I told you that my girlfriend's SLE, and it's just funny because both Damon and my girlfriend know all of the like drinks that I like which wines, and I have no idea. I can't even tell you. But then, but they show up in the house. I'm like, yeah, this one's good. I have no idea like what the any of the details. None of it. It's just kind of funny. So what's this?
So this is an extract from the Mary Claire article written by Justine Musk.
Mm-hmm.
And here she says, Elon made it clear he did not want to talk about Nevada's death. I didn't understand this, just as he didn't understand why I grieved openly, which he regards as emotionally manipulative. I buried my feelings instead, coping with Nevada's death and making my first visit to an IVF clinic, as in 2 months later, etc. So it's as if he couldn't handle the fact that the house had been flooded with a negative emotionality. He wasn't prepared to engage with that.
I think that's a jump. That's not necessarily what was stated. And one thing that I am concerned with in regard to this piece is that, it is only one side. It's her side of the story, but it's okay. Like, that's fine. I'm not saying it makes it bad information, but regardless, like, I think the point about the emotionality of the environment being affected, like, that wasn't ever said. You know what I mean? So
but it does. But also the idea is that we need to take these data points and find a narrative which explains as many of those data points consistently as possible. So if you line that up with interviews of him saying it's just hurtful what they're saying. People, it's actually asked in an interview, are what these people saying, is it wicked? Is it evil? And it's just hurtful. And this idea that, people saying negative things about the company, people saying negative things about what he's trying to do, it actually gets to him when it's that negativity. And
one thing
you go on?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just noticed something. It says in here, I didn't understand this, just he didn't understand why I grieved openly, which I think is actually, I won't say that it goes either way on this type, because I've noticed that from both. Like the FI suggestive or like LIEs that I know, generally when asked to express and like put their feelings out there, it's like a big step for them, right? And also I know a lot of FE mobilizing types who would rather like go hide away in their rooms because they don't want to affect everybody else from, how they're feeling and all that energy that's coming off of them, right? So it's kind of like, I think it's also not as if Musk has any difficulty sharing his emotions in a very public environment. He's been quite showy with his relationships. He's been showy with his tweets. He's been showy on the podcast with Joe Rogan about how worried and anxious he is about artificial intelligence. That's a little bit different. That's a little bit different because when you're looking at things like that, those are things related to like passions and global events, whereas the other is very personal, right?
Right.
So, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference there. expressing that. I would say though that a very clear display of emotion was when he was talking about his heroes, that
Yeah.
were So I can recognize, I can
Yeah.
kind of, I can give you that, like he was very public, but I don't know like how he felt about being in that position. I think he was just kind of caught in the.
But it doesn't seem interesting that he's so willing to be showy in that sort of public passion, conveying his passion about things. He even says further up, he even originally liked her because he could see the fire and passion in her. But also that when it comes to the very deeply personal, he comes across as almost stunted and unwilling to engage in that deeply personal, and that he perceives it as it's emotionally manipulative for things to be like this, as in these are bad emotions. I just find that a very profound point for someone to actually say that after the death of their son, their infant son, and their wife is grieving. And I should also say that Musk's introverted ethics it's not just it's weak, is that it seems to be continuously disregarded. We talked in the interview about, he said he has trouble. He wants to find what nothing finds more depressing than waking up next to an empty pillow, and that he's essentially afraid of being alone. And you were saying this is a sign of introverted ethics suggestive, but it seems to me the way this article goes, right? Musk gets originally attracted to Justine, and over time starts converting her into some sort of trophy wife. Wants her to have blonde hair, wants her to make the house nice, keep the house nice. Doesn't want her to show negative emotions. So, not really listening to, appreciating her desire to develop and grow in herself and feel like a competent, independent individual.
Yeah.
And when it finally comes to divorce, 6 weeks later, he messages her to say that he's now engaged to Tallulah Riley, which is a profoundly quick movement from the loss of his wife, the divorce of his wife, to finding someone completely new and jumping into a relationship with them, only for them to divorce and then get back together again after a brief interlude with Amber Heard. It doesn't feel to me like Elon Musk is okay. We know LIEs tend to be cautious people. For them to open themselves up to pain in their introverted ethics would not follow. For some to be against opening up such pain, it would not be following this sort of pattern. It would be too painful for them to do that. But
for them to do what?
For them to be jumping from one relationship to another so quickly, for them to not be regarding the personal intentions and desires of the person who's closest to them, but instead wanting them to be a sort of helpful, house cleaning, positive companion, and this need for her to be a companion.
I'll take that point.
Yeah,
I think that makes sense. I think that's a good point in regard to him, like maybe needing more time, because I have witnessed firsthand LIEs and their lasting emotions and like just getting out of a relationship, and it's really, really difficult for them. So I actually acknowledge that. That's a good point. I will say, actually, shoot, I actually forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah. So one thing. Oh yeah, that's right. One thing I will say is that one thing that I've learned recently, actually, about TEFI valuing types, specifically in regard to the LIE ESI dynamic, is that they'll often have this way of exchanging value, right? Like let's say like one partner likes a certain thing, that like, oh, I like your hair like this, or I like this like that, right? They might actually tell them like, this is what I like, and then sort of it's an opportunity for the other person to be like, well, this is what I like, and they do an exchange, right? Like this is something I've noticed recently. It's actually pretty interesting, but that's something that, you know, when we're looking at like him dressing up her up as a trophy wife, I don't know all the information, right? But it makes me wonder if there was an exchange there on both ends. You know what I mean?
Right. I see.
Because
So
that would be giving up my personal, like, to show how much I care about you, right? In that instance, that's essentially what's happening there. It's like I'll change what I do because I care that much about you that I'm willing to do that. It's an expression of value.
I haven't. What I will say, I haven't seen any evidence of that being a sort of mutual thing. Although there's also the fact that it's only Justine speaking, not Elon speaking about it. So it's hard to demonstrate whether that's true or not. What I wonder is, would it necessarily take the form of sort of an aesthetic exchange? I know Justine has talked about Elon's choices of aesthetic, and it was very much. She was talking, for instance, about her first of all encountering the engineers early on in the relationship, and how they're all the sort of the almost like her father confused them for the children of the engineers because they're in their t-shirts and they seem to be playing with toys. And also how later he realized he had to sort of step up and be both the engineer and the suit. And he had to be, in order to be an engineer who also makes money and not just designs machines for someone else, he had to encompass both roles. Certain aesthetic for a public reason. He was talking about that. So there was opportunity, I think, in that talk, in that TED talk, actually, for her to talk about some of her aesthetic demands of him, but she didn't mention that really. So I'm not sure that doesn't rule it out, that as a possibility.
Right.
But you haven't got that as a data point. It is a potential interpretation of that particular data point, but we haven't got the full picture to know that's the case.
So I was going to say, I was going to read something. I want to hear what you capture from this. So,
you want to share it?
Yeah. Let me just make sure. Oh, well, I was going to read it, but if you want to pull it up,
either's for whatever you're most comfortable with.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just read it then. It'll take less time. So I think it's pretty clear, though, that his FI is not very good. So there was a back and forth, and this is kind of annotating it. So it says, here are some highlights. He leaves a sigh and ends his effort at composure. I just broke up with my girlfriend, he says hesitantly. I was really in love and it hurt bad. He pauses and corrects himself. Well, she broke up with me more than I broke up with her, I think. Strauss, for his part, seems to completely forget that he is interviewing a titan, a visionary, human-sized lever. Starts offering him relationship advice. Musk discusses the breakup for a few more minutes, then asks earnestly, deadpan, is there anybody you think I should date? It's so hard for me to even meet people. He swallows and clarifies, stammering softly, I'm looking for a long-term relationship. I'm not looking for a one-night stand. I'm looking for a serious companion or soulmate, that kind of thing. I eventually tell him that it may not be a good idea to jump right into another relationship. He may not want to take some time to himself and figure out why his previous relationships haven't worked out in the long run. He said, it says that the guy interviewing him was worried about Musk's loneliness, but doesn't seem worried that he's getting a little off track in his profile of a billionaire who wants to send human beings to Mars. Musk shakes his head, says, and grimaces, if I'm not in love, if I'm not with a long-term companion, I cannot be happy. I explained that needing someone so badly that you feel like nothing without them is textbook codependence. That's what the guy said, but I don't. It doesn't say it here in this article. I don't know where what other article I saw it in, but I remember after that he had said that he really didn't care. He realized what it looked like, but he really didn't care that it looked like codependence, right? So I'm just curious. I'm curious what you.
Well,
from that?
as I think it's, first of all, very much a willingness to be emotionally authentic in the public eye. But also, yes, he wants a soulmate. He wants someone, and these are his words, a companion, to be there every day. To never, as also what he has said, never have wake up with a pillow empty neck.
Right.
And
he's like,
I
what's
would
the
say,
point of living?
But there's also a point here, right? Many LIEs never even get married. Because for them, they have this desire to remain independent, to be able to exercise their autonomy fully. And they have trouble reaching that sort of compromise between that autonomy and independence and actually having to live a collective life with someone else. They are introduced to introverted ethics from, say, the ESI or the EII, who understands them for who they are. And that's the important part. It's about the understanding for who they are. They're mutually understanding each other for who they are, not having to be anyone else than who they actually are. This idea of, I need someone to be my companion. I need someone every single day to be in the same bed as me. So every night to be in the same bed as me. I need someone to, well, and for him to also, having said this about his soulmate, essentially turn his first wife into a trophy wife. That's how she felt. She felt she was being turned into a trophy wife. She felt as if she wasn't really being recognized and understood for who she was and what she wanted. And also other things. He would do things like, he would say, if you were my employee, I would have sacked you by now. Which is an interesting point. Yes, he's a tough employer, but he seems to hold a similar sort of way of viewing his closest, his wife, to like someone who's like an employee. That they need to do things around the house. They need to fulfill this role, which is needed for him to be happy. And if they're not fulfilling this role, which is needed for him to be happy, then he's almost pointing out, I'm actually making an exception for you against my normal rules. Against the rules I'd hold for an employee, and comparing, contrasting the double standards he seems to be actually enforcing. It seems to me that he's approaching this, one with some introverted logic, but also with, again, a complete rejection of the introverted ethics, that personal connection with someone based on understanding what their soul is and what his soul is.
It seems like there's a lot of things that have been layered onto what's actually happened, though. Like when we look at this, it's like we're choosing interpretations, like as we're going through it, right? Like, it's kind of like I don't think there was any mention of like a role, for example, or like fitting a specific role. I understand, like she felt like a trophy wife, and I kind of get the correlation there, but it
is also implied by, if there were no role, though, I think it is strongly implied by him saying, if you were my employee, I would have sacked you by now.
Did he say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in. I can. It's in the article. Got it. Let me see if I can get it up again, just to show the audience as well. So, yeah. So
what do you think that?
It's right here, bloody hell! It's right here.
Right. Yeah.
If you were my employee, he said, just as often I would fire you. So
what do you think that tells you?
That tells me he is seeing it, that he would even begin to see it as a role for her to fill.
Right.
It's quite.
It's just funny because does that not look like, at the same time, does that not look like something an LIE would say?
Only if you subscribe to sort of the tough boss LIE stereotype.
I mean, they can be. I've seen LIEs that are very like, they can be very serious in some circumstances, and they can be very like, they can be very playful as well. I've seen a range, and also a range within one person, not just within different LIEs. But yeah, I can see this as I can see this as an LIE's way of trying to give like objective information as to why they're why there's
yeah,
a problem.
yeah. But why is that? What is that objective information about? Is it like why would the LIE decide that objective information is relevant? Because LIEs give relevant information, just give you any information. They are interested in what information is relevant to this particular point, this particular context. It is a strong element for them. So for an LIE in a romantic context, to bring in the context of actually firing someone, the context of someone performing a role, where if you meet these criteria, that decides whether you still are in this role or not, to then transpose that onto a personal relationship, which by nature should be outside of criteria. It should be outside of these certain boxes. Introverted ethics is the of introverted logic.
I recognize what you're saying. However, I think it's often a staple of the TEFI valuing types that everything's an exchange, right? Whereas, so I can kind of see like looking at a relationship and feeling like you're not getting any investment as being a problem. Whereas I'd actually argue that the TIFE types are the ones that will stay friends with someone, even though they haven't talked to them in years. It's like, oh, they see them the next day. It's like they never stopped. It's like nothing's changed, right? Whereas you're looking in the TEFI dynamic, you're looking for that exchange. You're looking for like effort from both sides and value investment from both sides. So,
well, yes, it comes, but the idea of the exchange comes from what behaviors manifest from intentions. So it's the idea, yes, you share, you say you love me, whatever it is, right? You have this relationship with me. What are you doing to in practical terms that shows that love? How are you acting that out? What is the actual effect on my life? What is the practical outcome? That's where I can see that idea of exchanges coming in. If you've got good intentions, why aren't they showing in these statistics and results?
Right, and
that's what I think is classic LIEs. Yeah,
TE is very action focused.
Yes,
it's like, what am I actually seeing you do that tells me that you care?
Yes, right. That would be very much LA. I agree with that point. But in here, that's not what he's saying. So if you were in this, if you were this other thing, which wouldn't even be something that'd be worth comparing if we were simply dealing with introverted ethics, I would do this action. And then the implication is there is a disjunct between the rule I'm following here and the rule I'm applying here. Because the idea of if you're an employee, if you did this, doesn't matter who you are, I'm going to fire you. That's my standard. That's my.
That's also a good point. I don't think this is a critical juncture point to differentiate between them, because I can see it going either way, right? But I do think that the point regarding how he's saying he feels like he needs relationships and things like that. That's something that it's kind of hard to swing the other way. You know what I mean?
If by saying I need a soulmate, I need to be able to wake up with someone next to me each day, I need a companion. I don't think it's hard to doesn't want to be lonely, and actually needs, even in his personal life, needs a source of someone else. I don't think it's hard to interpret that as actually an introverted sensation, extroverted ethics need. At the end of the day, if you were extroverted ethics focused, if you were introverted sensation also focused, right? And you're sitting on your own, there's no one there in your environment, no one contributing positivity to your life. It's just an empty stillness around you. You're doing all these amazing things, and you wake up and you're alone. It makes a lot of sense to me. I could certainly relate to it. I could back before Yeah.
But that's further from the point that he made in the argument or in the article, right? Like that's if you were to go on about how there's something about like not having energy around, that would have been closer to an argument of safety. Whereas really what he was focused on was his specific relationship and even soulmate, right?
Oh yeah, but when someone says I need a soulmate, even that is quite a dramatic way of saying I need someone who I have a connection with.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience with gammas, that's common, because while gammas can be, you know, like when I compare it to beta types are usually much more like they're focused on like meaning and things like that. You know, the TE types can be very dry, but in gamma, I've noticed that the point where that stops is when they're talking about that one person, right? That one individual, that one like consistent person they can turn back to, and that's where you start to see the meaning come in. And I don't know. Do you know?
I've more often known them to sort of it's clearly there, but they sort of keep it more to themselves in general. And the idea, he's not articulating about a person, an actual person he's with. He's talking about an idea or an ideal, almost like the idea of love. He says, I need to be in love. That's nothing. I need to be in love. And he's finding that person, whatever it is. So I'm not, it doesn't seem grounded in a person, an actual character, an actual human being who he has that connection with. And also if you take that and you contrast that with what he's actually done in his relationships. I go back to the idea that 6 weeks after divorcing Justine, he was engaged to Lula and subjecting himself to what would be a very, as you've said, very painful experience with introverted ethics for an LIE if he were to switch in and out like he did. It goes back to the point I made earlier, which is, yes, LIE can explain some of the data very, very well. The question is, but, and the sort of point I'm trying to make, the point I'm setting out to argue, which is that ILE explains can explain consistently the far broader range of data we can see. Because yes, you take that point on about the needing of the soulmate, you can make an argument for LIE. Can you then match it up with how he's then treated his wives in real life? Does that make sense? That's sort of my point in this section.
Mm-hmm. One thing I do want to comment, because I was seeing it in the comments when someone piggybacked off what you were saying, that, you know, gammas tend to keep that to themselves. The feels are largely unspoken, which is true. However, that wasn't necessarily the point, rather than more so that there was a sense of meaning in having a soulmate, and, you know, regardless of whether or not that's put out there and expressed. I don't think that I don't think even mentioning it is inconsistent either. I mean, consider this, right? Like, I've talked to an ESI in the past, and they're very guarded about like how much they let you know about over time. And whereas what's funny about LIEs is I think the difference in differentiating like what carries more weight in terms of when you should tell someone something or not is like much harder to guess. So what they end up doing is they just end up sharing a lot of information. You know what I mean? As a way of giving to that. Whereas actually noticing what carries more weight or less weight isn't something that they seem to notice very well. But yeah,
I mean, another thing I'd like to say.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Go on. What were you saying?
I was just going to say we could probably try to take a different juncture point, but you can go ahead and finish. Sorry.
Yeah, one last point, because it's relevant to this. It's about the postnup. And it's interesting here, right? I just got it being shared here. This wasn't of his own accord. He didn't come up with the idea of putting his wife through a postnuptial agreement, which gave him, I must say, a lot more of a power in terms of the finances. On its own, you may think, LIE, right, is thinking ahead, protecting himself, hedging his bets in case the relationship doesn't go so well, right? But also, it's interesting here that this wasn't about hang on, where she's talking about how he grew up in this male-dominated culture of South Africa, and the will to compete and dominate that made him so successful in business did not magically shut off when he came home. And also how, I think it's, see if I can find it. Yes. 2 years later, 2 months before our January 2000 wedding, Elon told me that we had an appointment with a lawyer who was going to help us with a financial agreement that the board of his new company wanted us to sign. When I looked at him, he said quickly, it's not a prenup. So that's interesting as well. That is the agreement which put Elon in a far stronger position. And it wasn't of his initiative. It was the board saying, Elon, what are you doing? Why can't you, well, you got to protect yourself from your wife. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me that here is where there's a clear, whereas Elon's shows lots of stubbornness in terms of the mood around him. When it comes to how force ought to be applied, he seems to be very malleable to the suggestions of others. And then, when nothing in the way of, but I want to be loyal to my wife, stood in the way of that, being supple and malleable to the expectations of others. You got to protect yourself in this particular way as we set out. So I just find that's another thing which, to me, rings of extroverted sensation role and introverted ethics as a vulnerable function.
Specifically from what?
Yeah, this idea that, yes, he's in a culture where you've got to be tough, you've got to be competitive, and he's sort of become, at that time, he was very much about being like that. And when he was told by people on his board that he had to essentially sign a financial agreement with his wife, that they advised him to do that, he just went and followed it. And despite the effect that would actually have on his relationship with his wife. And it's, if you compare it to, say, an LIE, I'd expect an LIE to be, although they're not strong in introverted ethics, feel that something was not right about taking the suggestions of these other people over the loyalty to his wife. And also, I would expect them to be far less about, this is how I'm going to take your advice on how I become more powerful and protect myself. It's got to come from me. It's got to come from my own initiative. Simple mobilizing versus role function, how one is responding to external pressures. And the other one is something which is coming from within, is something which I want to demonstrate to be of competence in, of capability in. So it's another thing, just overall the impression I'm getting. And it's not like wax you on the head, stereotypical ILE from this. I can see why a lot of people would not notice anything from reading through this. It's right. Very much, it involves a lot of reading between the lines and comparing different points of data to find what the pattern is. But it does ring a tune which doesn't actually make sense for LIE. And we know that ILEs, as I said, are responsive to extroverted sensation as a need, as something to live up to. It would make sense that during this more stressful period, leading up to 2008, which was the most stressful time in Elon's life, how he was perhaps more aggressive, more in role form. Over time, he stopped being that way, and he's actually become seemingly far more open with being more forgiving, being more, even more friendly to public.
If the circumstances are tight or difficult, it'll still be stressful even if you have SE mobilizing.
Oh yeah, no, certainly.
Really different,
But what I mean is how a type responds to stress and growth. So, one thing I've often thought is that when a type is at their best, they're really going into their mobilizing function. You tend to see it, if they are on a positive trajectory over time, you'll see them as they get older become more overtly in their mobilizing function. Whereas when they're sort of just a bit more cautious, not quite sure what to do, they fall back on their demonstrative function. We saw this it's one of the main arguments behind Donald Trump's typing, how when he was younger, he was far more business-oriented, far more factual in his communication, and over time became more and more grandiose, more and more emotive in his communication, more and more about appealing to the public and stamping his brand and everything. Eventually courting public opinion as a politician. I would say Elon Musk is following a similar sort of pattern from business towards being a sort of more public, mimetic figure. But also what I'd say is there's a stage even lower than that, lower than the demonstrative, when someone's actually active, sustained stress, where I think the role can become even more pronounced.
Do you really think that he didn't handle?
I think this idea.
I don't get the impression that in the time of stress he didn't handle it like an SE mobilizing type would have. Like I don't.
What do you mean?
I didn't see him as someone who was stressed out by him having to use his role SE, right? What I often see is that he confidently speaks on his philosophy regarding like how much time someone should be working, and how he works more than anybody else at the company, how he sleeps at the warehouses, and that's something consistent. I think if you go back, even like when we're not talking about Tesla, but in all of his companies, I've read that people have literally had to tell him like, dude, like you've been sleeping here like 3 days, 4 days, like we're about to have a really important meeting. You should probably shower, right? Like, which is clearly bad SI either way, right? But still, like he never seems to be like he's seeking what his ideal is this harmonious workflow. Rather, it seems like he kind of sticks to his guns in regard to how he's actually going about that whole work philosophy. I mean, he even said like vacations will kill you. Like, he talks about like if people want more time off, they're not working for the right company, because we're paving the way to the future. You know, and we can get into the NI stuff later, because I think that's pretty critical.
I do think there is this, certainly from that part of his career, and even to some degree now, there is this idea of him, talking about working very hard, and evidence of him having actually, worked that hard, especially around 2008, and saying that to people as the thing which you got to do. And this idea that, I believe in what I do, I'm really passionate what I do, so I'm willing to give all I can to the work which I'm doing at the expense of almost everything else. And I agree, shows weak introverted sensation, and shows certainly a public show of valuing this really hardworking, really tough kind of character, which then makes me think, yes, if that were then something actually stuck to relatively consistently over time, I think that definitely makes sense for, say, LIE, mobilizing function, etc. However, it doesn't seem to be what he is actually doing, especially not around now, especially not now his company isn't in an absolute emergency where if he doesn't work that hard, his dreams will turn to ash. So he's spending time buying Gene Wilder's house. He goes on to buy almost all the houses around Gene Wilder's house as well, to try and keep people out of actually crossing over and climbing the walls to enter Gene Wilder's house. He involves himself as a hobby, in his own words, in starting up a whole new company where he's going to be boring tunnels underground to get rid of the horrible, well, horrific, I don't know the exact word he used, but horrific traffic, which he has to go through in Los Angeles.
I mean, which could be a point for TE as well. Like, you're sitting in grueling traffic. That's what he was saying.
I know, but there's certainly TE there. I agree, there's TE there. Yeah, but it doesn't strike me as someone who is really focused on working absolutely as hard as I can, 24/7, to go after my goal, the goal being to get to Mars. It sounds like someone who actually is getting very distracted and doing other things, and not just whimsical personal projects with buying houses of people who he looked up to, but also even appearing on YouTube and doing meme reviews, going on these sorts of podcasts. If we compare it to, say, Jeff Bezos, I think is perhaps more likely an LIE figure. We see someone who is very cautious and conservative with his public appearances and what he's saying. Nothing which could disrupt the finances of his company. And he seems
Jeff Bezos.
Okay, but Bezos is very. I choose Bezos because I think he is an LIE, and also he, like Musk, he does also want to go to space.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't tried typing Jeff Bezos.
Fair enough.
But I will say that it's kind of. What I will say is that even though his that project does kind of seem TE-ish, but it's not like anything definitive. That's probably his like lowest concern project, right? Like he's got, I know he's done some interviews here and there, but that's kind of his lowest concern project.
Yeah.
Look at his other projects. This is where I'm starting to see that NI is definitely valuing, right? At least from what I can tell. And that's because, in all of these different conversations about why he's doing these different things, when he started Tesla, I'll just go through them. When he started Tesla, for example, he started Tesla to advance the electric car market because he was kind of surprised that we were still using gasoline cars. The thing is, even he wanted to advance the electric car market, even though like I remember what I'm trying to say is that he basically, they didn't patent the Tesla designs because they wanted the competition to have a chance to contribute to that outcome. So that, I mean, I know you could probably take that a little bit in a different direction as well, but that's one thing that I think, for that shows that he's got this clear vision for Tesla and its outcome and the electric car market, bringing that to market. But also you see, with solar energy, that's, I forgot, was it Solar City, right? Solar City is a company that he is working on so that he can contribute, more advancements to solar power, et cetera. And then you go on to so that they can have more sustainable energy for the future. And then, you go on further and you see SpaceX, which is clearly about, making the human species interplanetary. He talks about the potential of extinction event and things like that. And I mean, it makes sense. You expand your borders and you increase the chances that you're not going to be subject to extinction on a right. But as well as his AI interest, which he's invested in AI because he's concerned that it'll affect the direction of humanity in the sense of another extinction event. He doesn't want humans to become extinct, and so as a result, he works on this AI project. And his philosophy is, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So he created Neuralink such that we can have a neural pathway to computers. That way, in case artificial intelligence takes over, at least we'll be with them and not destroyed as a result of them, right? And so, I think a lot of these things here, especially when we're looking at, Mars and space travel and the artificial intelligence Neuralink interest, it seems like he's definitely looking at like the outcome of humanity itself and looking for the best ways to redirect the path of time. I mean, is that not fair?
But if that's the case, you mentioned he has a least priority project. Why? And therein lies the point I'm trying to make. Why on earth does he have a least priority project? Why is he, if he's got all these projects floating around, which he's trying to do, why on earth is as his hobby digging holes under Los Angeles? It's not as if he's got, everything's running optimally. When he set up Solar City the parent company was Tesla, which is interesting. There was just such the bandwidth of the amount of resources necessary to keep both afloat fully was not enough. He had to divert employees from Solar City back to Tesla when there were difficulties. It does seem to me that, he is starting up a lot more than he can actually handle at maximum competence, maximum efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't fit in with the idea of someone who is extroverted logic leading. The main point, more than anything else, is how well are the things that I'm doing being done? How can I improve and maximize that efficiency?
And it's also a concern in terms of typing it, because it's also not inconsistent with LIE to chase after like many different things and not recognize the balance and effect that these things have with one another. There's no SI to account for all of these varying interests. There is a reductionistic aspect of NI, where you're taking the multiple different things that you can do, sort of converging them to a point. However, like I have seen LIEs often are chasing opportunity so much that they don't realize the effect it has on their sense of space. So in that regard, it's kind of difficult to say that it goes either way, because I can see the same issue happening with ILEs. I think it would just be characterized slightly differently.
Yes. I mean, certainly you have the issue with an LIE. Well, there's another reason why the vulnerable function is seen as a mental function. Is because it's actually, despite one's rejection of it, is very much relevant to your leading function. So for an LIE to truly realize the extroverted logic, they need to be aware of the space around them. They need to be aware of the flow and harmony of their processes, but they ignore it despite that, and so it ends up biting them in the bottom.
Right.
And it's the same thing for an ILE. They want to explore new possibilities, but you do need networks of relationships. You need to be able to trust people to realize those possibilities. So again, it lets one down. So what I would say in that regard, I do think that LIEs, yes, they may ignore their space. That may be the problem. That isn't, though, setting up lots of different ventures at the expense of the full and complete pragmatism of the ventures which are most important to them, which they're actually focusing on. Now, Musk is struggling with that. I say Musk is, as you just said in the debate, you quite rightly said, Musk almost curses the numbers of ideas he has. As in, coming up with so many different ideas, so many different distractions. I just get distracted. It almost like he gets distracted so naturally. He's fighting against himself to realize the vision which is most important to him, which is getting to Mars, and also secondarily energy, energy in cars and transport, etc. Thirdly, in artificial intelligence and preventing artificial intelligence becoming an issue and doing safe research for everyone to use artificial intelligence, and the idea that eventually we'll be so connected with machines that will be able to resist the artificial intelligence which could potentially turn against us. So really there are three main projects there. Out of those three main projects, the getting to Mars seems to be the most important one of them, right? Fair enough. Now, within all of that, why is he setting up more and more that are, as you say, these least priority? It isn't a sensation lacking thing. And he seems to be fighting against himself in that. He knows some ideas carry more weight than others. But it's almost like he cannot even help himself. He gets fascinated by something new and pursues it. That's not what he said, but it does seem to explain why he's doing these things, why he's doing these actions. If there's one thing which I've taken from Rowan Blunt, is that there is going to be a point where what someone says and what someone does might not match. And that when that happens, you should look at what they do. And it seems to me that what he's doing makes a lot of sense in terms of the ILE, even while there was a long period where his rhetoric, when he was getting Tesla going, when he was getting investment, he was talking about how hard he worked, how practical he was, how much he gave his heart and soul to make his projects work. They seemed like, there wasn't a ghost of a chance for some of them. It seemed so unlikely. And that in that time, I was trying to show everyone, yeah, but I'm working as hard as I can. I'm getting everything going. There's nothing going to stand in my way to make this happen. I'm not the guy who gets distracted and charges after something completely different, while I'm also handling the most important project in the world. This is the most...
Right.
Huh?
I said, yeah, he clearly does a little,
Yeah, and and that's why, again, when I turn back to the idea of the ILE typing, explaining the broader range of data consistently, whereas LIE accounting very, very well for some of that data. If you take that rhetoric, yes, LIE does seem to make sense in the face of it. If you take this idea of a very complex human being, and I doubt anyone would say that Elon Musk isn't a complex human being, who is navigating social pressures, financial pressures, pressures to get investment, the pressures to get people on board to take him seriously, and keeping in mind he wasn't taken seriously. He went to Russia, they spat at him, said they couldn't take him seriously when he was trying to procure missiles so he could start off SpaceX, and he was bullied as a child, horrendously bullied as a child. His father would belittle him and make fun of him. He's got every reason why he'd need to try to change how he portrays himself with social pressures. And now at this point where he is so powerful, he has so much money, he's almost above those social pressures. He is one really coming into this far more childlike aspect of himself, engaging with these meme reviews. And I could show the videos of these. It's infantile stuff. It's hilarious to watch, but it is infantile. And but also at the same time, still feeling that when people are attacking him in a nasty way, he feels he could just get rid of all his possessions. That almost in that what he has got in a material sense, the wealth, his power, he could give away the material vestiges of that to suit public opinion, which in itself, in my opinion, is very much extroverted ethics over extroverted sensation.
Right.
That is speaking to me a lifelong narrative of an ILE in the world of adversity and complexity, who is clearly highly intelligent, clearly has these dreams, clearly wants to go to Mars. Now, you can call that introverted intuition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of want to comment on. I can acknowledge that when you kind of back out a little bit and you look at things, you have this one aspect of him that's so playful, and I acknowledge that, but I don't think it's inconsistent with LIE because I've seen it with LIEs very often. But, it's like I could see that very playful nature. However, there's also that other side. These are two sides of him. And so, it's not like that's what makes it tough. I will say, though, when we're talking about the ideas and the different things that he's doing, you even said yourself, he goes back to this vision. The question wasn't whether or not he had a specific vision for what he wanted to manifest. He's got a very clear indication. I think he decided that when he was like 12, if I'm right, that he wanted to go to Mars. So it's like even though he does spend a little bit of his time in things that are like largely entertainment focused, I also know LIEs to specifically like call everything an investment, including entertainment. And I've actually seen LIEs like greatly over invest into entertainment. So, so it's like, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to defeat that as an argument, right? I will say it's not the most ideal example of LIEs in that regard, like when they're over investing in entertainment. However, I wouldn't say it's common, but I wouldn't say he's over investing either. Because if you look at how much he spends in, for example, his tunneling company, it's a very, very low percentage of the time in comparison to what he spends in, his larger projects. And then, yeah, he's been on interviews, but it's like, I don't think that's inconsistent. It's like, just because someone goes out and spends a little bit of time, not sticking to the vision, it's like, is it really inconsistent to say that LIEs will never do anything else but work on what their projects are for the long term? It's definitely very likely that they're going to be spending a lot of time on it, but the question is, like, is it likely for an ILE to have a very clear vision and then stick to that vision? I mean, all of these things are very clear and directed, focused paths, right? And sure, he does have a few other things over here, but is that inconsistent with any demonstrative? I will say I'm very against lumping in any the demonstrative values with the other values, which I think is often a mistake in socionics, but or in the community. But there is always a sense of generalized sense of those values. You call them pseudo values. Do I value relationships in the way that FI valuing types do? No, but do I take care of all of my friendships and relationships just naturally as I go about my life? Yes. So I don't think it's inconsistent with LIE to say that they have varying interests, and to give time to things like entertainment either, because it is role FE. It's not something that I don't take it as inconsistent. I kind of find it weird to try to imagine an ILE that is both extremely concerned with having a soulmate, doesn't think they can be happy without one, and also has a very clear sense of direction in terms of what they want from their life, and sticking to that despite having other projects. It makes sense from the point of LIE to say, well, they do have these very clear projects, but there are these other things that they have that they're interested in as well. That makes sense considering any demonstrative. But would it make sense for an ILE to have that consistent long-term vision that doesn't change, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Did you think I'm an LIE?
No, I don't know. But why is that? Do you have a consistent long-term vision? Doesn't change?
Well, it's bringing socionics. It's realizing the potential of socionics.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely that. I could do so many other things. I could go into creative writing. I could go into acting. I'd like to someday go into politics. I'd like to someday do all these other things as well. And despite myself, I find myself dabbling in that as well. But each time I tell myself, right, I've also got to do this, because this is the idea of the greatest potential out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I do. I don't think anyone could say that I am not doing socionics. Even now I'm been less public. That's because I've been working on my test.
I want to point a key point there, which is that your reasoning was, in this example, well, it's the idea with the greatest potential.
Yeah.
But is that, when we look at Elon Musk, for example, is he doing the Mars mission is his number one project because it has the greatest potential? No, he's actually said that most of his projects have very low chance of succeeding. He said that it's very, very, very unlikely. It's like 90% chance that this company is going to fail or something like that. He said it very many times in regard to a lot of his projects. If you want to, we can pull it up.
Yeah, but that's but I think you misunderstood what I was saying there. I was saying that the outcome of bringing socionics into the public eye, making socionics have its potential unlocked, that carries the greatest number of possibilities. I didn't say it's the most likely to succeed. No. If anything, again, it's a similar sort of problem which Musk has. I'm starting on my almost like a one-man band trying to get this strange Russian theory, which people on Wikipedia think is a pseudoscience, to be practiced around the world, used in dating, used in education, used in business psychology, and all these different applications and all these different ways of realizing this theory. I think it's got incredible possibility, but do I think there's probability? only if I devote my heart and soul to it.
Mhm.
And that is what I see. And the more I look at Elon Musk, the more I'm relating to with Mars. And no one could say that forming the first self-sustaining colony of Mars doesn't carry bucket loads of potential. Because bloody hell, that's the rest of the human race and everything that can get contained within.
Right, but
So,
was his reasoning
yeah.
was that his reasoning? Because I recall his reasoning being that the reason he was going there was to prevent extinction events, or increase the chances of sustaining consciousness, which is a very different goal and very focused goal in comparison to thinking what are all of the things that we can do when we go to Mars.
Yes. No, I take that point. It then takes us back to the idea of the ILE under social pressures, under public expectations, and also what he does despite what he says. Because yes, he's communicated that people who need to invest, people who would normally be conservative with their money, he's trying to get them to invest in what he also knows has very little possibility and probability. He's trying to get them to invest because at the end of the day, if we don't, we're dead.
Mm-hmm.
They're creating that urgency. That's how you get those. That's how you persuade those. But that's how you get the government.
But see, I understand that. I understand that can be a tactic to do that, but there's no indication that that's what he's doing. Like there's no reliable indicator that he's specifically doing a tactic to get people on board rather than just having a strong belief that that's the right thing to do.
I'm sure he believes that there is the threat of extinction. This is the way we get out of extinction. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Whether that is necessarily his apparatus for thinking that through and how it actually makes decisions is a different matter. You could take that point and use that to also, and it being a true point and one you actually believe in, he's had to convince others. It doesn't necessarily mean that is actually his motivator. His professed motivation, not necessarily his real motivation. And the way you can find his real motivation goes back to why I'm looking at the discrepancy between what he professes and what he's now doing. And take us back to this point about these least priority approaches. An LIE, right? Yes, they can do other things. I'm not saying an LIE can't, but I'm saying an LIE who has set out that this is extinction level, live or die. I'm doing everything I can to make this work. I will not do anything else. I'm only working, no time for comfort, no time for sleep, no time for anything. Oh, but I also really like the idea of getting rid of the level of traffic in Los Angeles and creating a boring company and merchandising it with flamethrowers from Spaceballs. Mm-hmm. So did you, and also buying, again, going back to Gene Wilder's house, buying that, talking about how he's going to build his own dream home. He talks about that into Joe Rogan as well. And then he talks about, but also I know I've also got this thing I need to be working on, and I hate all these ideas that are in my head. I'm trying to restrain that as well. So, this is, I see this tension within him of his natural motivations, and also the biggest idea he has, the idea of the greatest potential, and also in these social environments, how he has to be and appear in different ways. We know he has to appear and be in different ways because he said to his wife at the time, I need to look like the guy in the suit. I need to be the suit and the engineer. I have to be this way for these people to get them to agree and take me seriously and not have, as happened in Russia, the guy spitting in his face. Mm-hmm. It's piecing all that together. And Eiley does it under it all.
So you think that lies towards Eiley, the suit thing?
Yeah, if he realizes, okay, yes, you could use LIE role as well to explain the putting on of the suit, right?
Well, I mean, you could use that, like objective information.
Yeah, I mean, you could use the fact that yes, at the end of the day, wearing a suit makes people take me seriously, right? And multiple types could do that. But what I'm saying is there's also an ILE would also do that. Other types could do that as well. Right. The point is that is a reason for why he would appear away and appear a certain way and profess to have certain motivations, which aren't necessarily entirely transparent. which would enable him to achieve his goals. And I would say, could do that as well. I remember Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, right? His goal from when he was very young was to become Prime Minister. He pursued that goal. He saw it through. And also during that time, he also professed to do things which weren't actually true. He used to say, oh, there's more chance of me becoming the Pope than becoming the next Prime Minister. And he said, I have no ambition to become Prime Minister. And, you know, that suited him at the time because it got the attention of him. He essentially had to say that at the time. Ireland will do that. When under pressure, they will say the thing which they need to do for people to take them seriously or to divert attention away from them. And other types will do that as well. But I'm saying the ILE is not exempt from this. And that can explain why that difference between what he professes and what he's doing now. And also where extroverted ethics as a mobilizing function rather than a role function makes sense is how he's now coming out and growing into this extroverted ethics. All this public stuff, this attention creating, even to the point where the SEC is investigating him again for making tweets which are compromising markets, which are creating all sorts of discord, and what other people who are far more commercially cautious are saying forced errors in how he unforced errors in how he presents himself online. The only other person I know as powerful to also make these sorts of unforced errors, as they call it, on Twitter is Donald Trump. For the very similar, what I think is a very similar mechanic, the mobilizing extroverted ethics, coming into play now that he's growing, he's casting off more of that external pressure, and I think growing into himself to some degree.
Yeah, I one thing that, I'll say particularly has always aggravated me about LIEs, just personally in my interactions with them, is they like to test you, and they like to throw stuff your way to see if they can create an effect, right? And it's something that they'll do because they don't really care about the way you can differentiate it from ILE is that they're not concerned about the social atmosphere in that circumstance. I've seen them laugh at people getting upset while they just keep saying more things that they're like, oh, this is just great. I'm loving this. Everyone's mad, and so it's kind of like, I don't see that as necessarily consistent. I recognize your point regarding, that it could be seen as being an FE mobilizing thing, wanting to have that effect. But at the same time, I see it as a TESE thing too. Like, let me see what I can throw out there that'll cause a ripple, so.
Well, I get what you're getting at. I think I know exactly what you're referring to. Now, what I would say, right, is in the case of LIEs resorting to testing people, right? Because why do they test people? They don't pick up on people's real intentions naturally or quickly, instinctively. They have to sort of collect data over time to see the trends of, are you actually a person I can trust? Are you actually the person who understands who I am and who I actually understand, right? So they can, at times, put in things to test people to see that, to get the data. But that is a whole different world from throwing out tweets to create huge ripples with people they are never going to meet.
I'm not saying it's inconsistent with ILE, but just from a theoretical standpoint, I think it would make more sense to see it from an SE valuing type than it would. Like, of course, the FE, putting the FE out there, but why would an ILE want to be so controversial in that regard? I mean, yeah, I know they have the whole, they can often be very trollish, but I also find that with LIEs. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's just them collecting data, because I see them do it for fun, like out of personal enjoyment, and it's like throwing something out there to get everyone aggravated. And whereas, like, it's not the same as when my FE valuing friends will do it, because we're doing it and it's clearly just a joke, right? But they will literally poke at your sensitive spots, or they'll throw things out there that you don't like, and they'll try to make it worse if they can. And then, and see if they can aggravate you. I think they're not as great at detecting when that is, but when they find that point, they'll keep using it. They'll be like, "Oh, now I know what the tactic is. Now I can put this in my pocket and use it later, and I'll throw it out when I want to make people mad." That's often why ESIs will get so aggravated with them. And I see that what ESIs will usually do is just hold their composure and make it pretty clear that they have issue with it, but without giving the emotional reaction that I've seen LIEs seek out.
I haven't seen the tendency which you're describing of LIEs becoming public trolls for the sake of
public trolls.
Well, yeah.
I just mean they're fun, but
yeah. But but for the sake of fun, for the sake of throwing something and seeing how people react, and taking gratification in creating an emotional reaction to people.
Well, I don't think
what would explain? You say that's SE.
It's definitely SE because you're definitely having an effect. The LIE I know doesn't just do it in that way. Yeah, I mean that is one way that he does it. However, there's like a number of things that like you're like, oh my God, like I can tell that he was here. I can tell that he did this because he's given you such clear indicators of like totally having affected something. And I think he relishes in having effect, regardless of whether or not it's emotional or not. But I think when everyone else gets emotional, to him, he's fine. He's clearly sticking with F5 values. It's like, even if everyone is pissed off, oftentimes he'll just laugh, and for one of my friends, he'll just laugh and everyone's like pissed off at him. Like, dude, can't you see you're affecting everybody?
Yeah. Yeah. And also I can see LIEs at times winding up their friends, right? In a personal environment, right? Close environment, close friends, they know each other well. LIEs do have a silly side. They can have fun. I'm not ruling that out.
Right.
What I'm trying to get at here is Elon Musk making over some time now lots of different tweets, all provocative in different ways. Some provocative because they're just expressing how he feels politically, how he feels about certain social issues. Some about changes in the stock. Some are exaggerated claims of having secured a deal when actually he hasn't quite secured that deal and the SEC investigates him. Some of them are just blatantly memes and play and with no identifiable reason except to play up to his audience. Like posting a meme, posting a series of different memes, and then they're also appearing on videos where he reviews the memes of himself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure whether there's an extra sensation in that. It's more than just testing. Oh, if I say this, how does the economy change? How does the finances change? How much power do I excite? It seems to me to also be how much of a reaction can I generate in people watching me, and different kinds of reactions, a rainbow of different sorts of reactions depending on what he's saying. Now that suggests to me far more strongly he's testing out his extroverted ethics, but he's testing out his extroverted sensation.
Here's
additionally. Okay, go.
No, it's all right. Go ahead. All right, I'll take it. So one thing I'll point out there, though, is that I find it strange that an FE mobilizing type, right, doesn't seem to care what the reaction is. Like one thing that you saw with Trump was that he would get quite bothered from the reaction that he would incite in other people, because people would rally so strongly against him in some circumstances. I think that you're likely to see a lot more concern for like how you're coming off to people. And while it can be experimental and you can like you can see them in a kind of an FE mobilizing and a kind of like, let me see what kinds of things I can make happen. I think the concern to uphold and maintain that and manage that well is still there for that type, rather where, what you see with, LAEs is often just I wouldn't expect them to have that same concern. Like they're going to revert to their values of, well, and I'll admit, like I often call the role function a crutch function, because it's easier to do oftentimes than your suggestive. But I think the values are going to revert to the suggestive, where you're going to see someone who's not really concerned with how they're coming off in public, right? In terms of emotional affect. But yet he's still doing it. So it doesn't seem like he's trying to uphold this image or perception of him. It kind of seems like he's chaotic, and he doesn't really seem to care about his image. Whereas I would expect from you, for example, in a lot of different circumstances in the past where something controversial happens, I see you're very careful in your language to present that you are in a point of disagreement without having any explicit issue with the other party. And I see that you're very careful about how you handle those very formal conflicts and interactions, because you're upholding an image, and you care about that emotional reaction. Whereas I think a lot of his reactions are very careless, to the point where it makes you, and not careless in an oblivious way. Well, like where when you look at Trump, for example, you see he seems to be somewhat oblivious as to why what he's saying is causing so much issue. Whereas when you look at someone like Musk, it seems very intentional that he's trying to create that effect. So that's kind of, I think there's definitely a difference there.
I mean, go back to myself. Mm-hmm. I think I do take quite big risks. Even having a YouTube channel carries risks. If I were to take part in a debate and come across like an idiot and be utterly destroyed, that will affect my image and standing. Right. I take the risk because I want to be in front of people. I want to perpetuate a certain image, and I want to be able to also express what I think. Mm-hmm. Not all of it's very professional. It could even get in the way of a job in the future, depending on what sort of job I apply to. Sometimes I think about those risks because I don't naturally think about them.
Yeah, I was just saying it as a compliment, because I've always noticed that you're very cordial.
Thank you. But also, one image which I do like to put across is that I am ideally unfailingly polite. Mm-hmm. I try to be that way. That's an image which I think is important about who I am, how I like to express myself. But I also take risks on my Facebook. Mm-hmm. People know me on Facebook as the guy who posts all sorts of controversial stuff, which gets everyone debating and arguing on my Facebook wall. I don't do it on Twitter because I just don't like Twitter. I don't feel I can express myself on Twitter the same way I can on Facebook. Too much of a limit in terms of characters. I don't want to have to fuss and worry about limiting my characters. When it comes to expressing myself, often I do that at the expense of what is actually wise. My family have shouted at me and told me off, saying, "You've got to shut down your Facebook. You're not going to be able to get a job by saying those sorts of things." Mm-hmm. And I say, "No, I can't be in a world where I can't express who I am and how I am." And I think I feel as long as I do that politely and in a non-abusive way, I feel like I must be able to say what I feel and how I think in a public place.
I think the point that we're seeing differentiating those two is that in your circumstance, you're looking at like how you're expressing yourself, right? And being true to that expression. Whereas what I see from Elon, at least from what I can tell, is that he's really just doing things for reaction. Whereas I don't really know if his is a faithful, honest expression of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but again, the doing things for reaction, that was me when I was younger. That was me before I was crafting the very polite kind of image, the image of someone who isn't a troll. So I'm not out to troll people now. I'm out to be seen as a provider of reason and truth and all the rest. But I was one of the worst trolls online. I used to say things to wind people up all the time. I used to enjoy doing it. And even now, when I create my debate, people think I'm being controversial for the sake of being controversial. No, I'm being as sincere and authentic as I can be. But I also like the fact that there are people reacting and commenting and getting huge views, and I'm looking to see what the likes are, what the engagements are. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to focus too much on me. I know that it becomes a bit too self-indulgent. But the point is,
Sorry.
I see that making sense for Annihilate. But what I would say, on the other hand, if you were to look at the Twitter of Jeff Bezos, you see a disgustingly anodyne set of tweets. Everything which is about trying to make himself look a bit more human, a bit more relatable, so that you are more willing to, buy into his business. And it's a very sort of conservative, take no risks. I don't really want to have to do the extroverted ethics stuff, but I know I have to in order to be successful, in order to make this business of mine work. And so I'm going to do this stuff in the way which is minimizing potential harm all the way through. And when you take Elon Musk, he's not minimizing harm. He's putting himself at clear risk in order to play around with different emotions and reactions and have fun and also express himself. And it is also expressing himself. An example, when the SEC was investigating him for like the second time or first time, he said SEC, where the E means Elon's. The idea being a sort of some kind of fellatio. So
say it again. I actually didn't get the point or the joke.
Well, the idea of the idea is that he's saying suck Elon's.
Oh, gotcha. Right.
Yes. Yeah, it's fellatio. So it's a reference to, he made a reference to fellatio about the organization that was investigating him, right? Already when he was at risk, and he's still, expressing how he feels about it in a way which is not in line with his financial interests, because he's losing millions of pounds each time he has to settle with these people, and he's riling up still. So frequently, I think that is extrovert ethics at the expense of extroverted logic, which I think is certainly something you can expect to see in an ILE from time to time, not something I think you'd expect to see in an LIE. And also, LIEs themselves can say controversial things, but you got to take it by context as well. Where does it line up with extroverted logic? Where is it against extroverted logic or for extroverted logic? Quentin Tarantino, I think, has far more room to say more controversial things than a Jeff Bezos or a Bill Gates. Well, Bill Gates actually can say more controversial things now because he's past the point of wealth creation. When it comes to Jeff Bezos, no, he's playing it as safe as he can be in terms of what this image creation is. And it comes across not particularly genuine, but to satisfy that demand in order for people to actually respond to him in a positive enough way to buy his products, to go onto Amazon and order from him rather than go to the local shop. And we can go back to ideas of what you said about Elon Musk also want people to realize his ideas. Because another thing, Trey, right? If we take the idea that Elon Musk is about ideas, he's about the idea of going to Mars. You can call it a vision, you can call it an idea. He wants everyone to help out in getting to that point. He doesn't care about competition. He wants people to actually be doing it as well. You compare that to, say, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. His main thing was aggressively. Well, Bill Gates is aggressively taking over any organization which becomes a competitor. And Jeff Bezos, again, buys out the companies which compete. Very much about that, and which it makes complete sense in terms of extrovert sensation. When it comes to Elon Musk's ideas, short of achieving the idea, realizing the potential, there doesn't seem to be any other push for extroverted sensation for its own sake.
I mean, I acknowledge that generally the creative
is not used in the capacity that you would think it would take priority over the base's agenda. So I guess in that from that point of view, you can kind of say that you can say like, isn't it a little bit weird that he's willing to like risk losing wealth or things like that for an idea or for a vision, right? I can kind of see that point. How do you think we should progress from this point?
Well, I guess the question is, well, we could ask some questions. We could take some questions. I'm interested to know what after me giving you this barrage of, I don't know, word vomit. What do you think of it?
Hold on. I think that there are some points that are really hard to overlook for LIE.
Yeah.
And so that makes it difficult when entertaining like certain other point of views in regard to ILE. It just seems like, you know, the things that I think primarily stand out are how directed he seems in regard to his, how it seems to have to do with making time corrections, essentially. Like, in regard to NI, is in regard to FI, I can see how like he does tend to have a sort of exploratory aspect to him. He likes to have fun, clearly, and it's just tough because I would expect a lot more indications of SI valuing over the excessive work, you know? And that's why like, even though we've gone through these and there's been some points that kind of, a lot of our points have essentially come to, well, this can be interpreted as these different ways, right? And that's been pretty consistent. And so I acknowledge that. You know, there's been a lot of points like that. I think that seeing SI valuing, overlooking what seemed to be FI valuing, that's difficult. I think there are, and in the same way you say that there are a lot of different things that you can kind of look at and say, well, you know, he seems to be kind of just trying to have an emotional reaction, or seems to be looking for excitement and a lot more like amusement from things, whereas you would expect a more serious, directed approach from an LIE. In my personal experience with LIEs, I don't always see that seriousness. So, I mean, I don't know. It's personally, it's tough. It's tough to go the other way, and I think that there are some points that I can acknowledge are good points in regard to ILE, and I think, you know, NI kind of taking precedence generally wouldn't make sense, you know, in regard to what we're seeing with him and his idea. It does seem kind of strange that he is willing to put himself in situations where, you know, but I think a big part of that goes back to FI valuing too, though. And I think I didn't finish my sentence. Let me try to be more clear. But in regard to him putting the companies at risk by allowing other companies to have like space to compete in a sense, it shows priority over the outcome, or priority over the idea's manifestation itself, than the monetary aspect, right? But you can still tie that back to FI valuing to account for that if you're saying, well, he just values the outcome more than he does the money, right? And so like he's got personal values for the outcome more than the money. So I can definitely say that it's a tough one. But there are some points that are kind of hard to overlook, namely the points regarding FI, namely the points regarding like where is he valuing SI? You know, he seems like valuing SI is a really tough one to see. So yeah, I think those are some of the biggest problems, but I've kind of been rambling in different directions.
Okay. I think that dealing with the SI point, looking through what we've covered already in terms of his personal life, I think the SI points are there. So if you go to, and the thing is, the thing about SI for a suggestive function, it's you can uniquely of your quadra act like it isn't a thing until suddenly it is the thing. And then you can see it actually does become a pain. You're not aware of it, it's a pain for you until it suddenly is. Now, we can see that, I think, in Musk being able to wade into highly tough situations, pushing himself past his brink in a way you'd expect for someone with a vulnerable function. But then you see things like him really having a fixation over blonde hair in his wife. Whoever it is, he eventually tries to persuade them to change their hair to blonde. He really places an emphasis on trying to get that aesthetic perfection of his cars, even if it's not cost efficient. And he said, I don't care about the cost efficiency. I just want this to look perfect. There's also the fact that when he says something like harsh words being spoken against him, it feels hurtful. And that's suddenly it becomes a harsh environment. Yes, this is the thing about ILEs. They will both say provocative things that generate lots of drama. They can do that. At the same time, they can feel their entire mood goes down when people are saying negative things about them in the public sphere. How do you square that? Because it seems inconsistent. It makes sense, well, from my personal experiences, I can think that gives some clarity. I used to court very much deliberately negative attention at times because I felt I could create that reaction. And yes, people speaking badly about me, fine, it's on me. But I created it. I showed my ability to create that effect, right? And I was exercising my FE. That was more important to me at the time than being satisfied in the SI. It's only, but then in situations where I haven't gone out to create an effect, where my pride in my FE isn't the thing I'm focusing on, that suddenly I feel I can be hit by the SI and the environment becomes uncomfortable and it becomes hostile and unwelcoming. And that affects my mood greatly. If it's under my control, I feel I can take on that adversity far better. There's research to suggest that we are far more resilient to the adversity we take on than the adversity which is thrown at us. So in the context of an ILE, it makes sense of an ILE court controversy around them. Almost deliberately, they get the positive of the FE having done that, and they're more able to weather the SI knock. But when it comes to it not being something which they've created themselves volitionally, then suddenly they feel the full brunt of that pain. And that seems to explain to me why Elon Musk can both be a provocateur online, which I don't think the LIE is going to be doing in his situation, and at the same time showing how he doesn't like negative emotional environments at his expense or just in his environment. When it comes to his nearest and dearest grieving over loss of his son and over people who, you know, he's actually admired quite a bit, people he looked up to, people who are heroes. He's never met these people, but he looks up to what they're about, the idea of these are the people who went to space, and they're now belittling him in public. That being helpful. I think it does fit that idea of the introverted sensation as a mobilizing function. So sorry, as a suggestive function, especially when blocked with extroverted ethics, both of them together. I'm not sure what you meant earlier about extroverted logic types using extroverted ethics as a crutch. I would have thought that makes sense for a demonstrative function, actually. And I could see how a role function would be used to deal with external pressures. But my impression has always been I would discard it at a moment's notice. As soon as I didn't have to do it, I wanted to get rid of it. So why do you think it's a clutch?
A crutch?
Sorry, a crutch, not clutch.
Yeah. So, for example, like when you look at IEIs, right? You see that it's much easier for them to approach things in a peaceful, harmonic way than it is for them to, have a sort of controlling effect, right? So I think in regard to, like, we're talking specifically about taking care of my environment and its needs, that is very stressful. And I have gotten much better at it over time, but I would say that it's always been, in terms of values, it's always been a little bit more tempting to revert to SI than it is to fully dive into SE, because it's easier to get along in a harmonic sense than it is to push your will onto the environment. And I find that it's often true in most types that it's a little bit easier to do one than it is to do the valued elements. Not that they can't overcome that, but just that it's a higher dimensionality, and so it's a little bit easier to approach things in that light.
Now, I see what you're saying there. So, yeah, types will turn to their role function more often than their suggestive function. The suggestive function is almost a bit out of reach, and so the role function can be used.
Right.
I'm not sure if it makes sense to say that the role function is being used instead of a suggestive function, as if it is a preferable thing in that moment. I think that would be the wrong way of describing it, because one's valued, one isn't.
Right.
I think it makes sense.
It's definitely more preferable to the suggestive. Definitely. That it's a little bit easier to revert back to the role. Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's called the crutch. Because ideally you're not using the crutch. Maybe there's better terminology.
The chronology, I would have thought of it in a different way. The chronology, but I see the phenomenon, but I have a different idea or opinion on the chronology.
Okay.
I would have thought that the role is the thing which we respond to external pressures on. We have to be this certain way to get by. So we'd rather not have to deal with it at all, rather than it's just spontaneously taken on with the suggestive function not being there. However, when the suggestive function is being provided, often by an external source, that frees up the requirement to be in the role at all. For instance, if harmony, if people are getting along well, if it's a calm mood, things are pleasant, there's no need to be competitive. There's no need to be the dominant one. If it's an IEI, the opposite. If the mood is energized, if there is action, if there's no time to wait and think, you just got to do it. There's no need to harmonize anything. You just act. When it comes to an LIE, right, you're with someone who understands you for who you are. You don't need to be any other way. You just have to be yourself, because they understand who you are. There's no need to be extrovert. There's no need for the role.
I think there are specific.
That's how Peter did it to me, and it's always made sense.
Hello. I can't hear you.
Hello, sorry, the internet went a bit funny.
Oh, yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit more nuance in that, because like I said, when we look at the aspect of SI regarding the environment, that's still a stressor point. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've been working on for some time, trying to work the kinks out of, actually. I think it has something to do with the way different elements are valued in different forms, but I guess that's kind of a side point. I'm kind of curious. I mean, you suggested earlier that maybe we should
take questions.
Take questions in regard to Elon Musk. I guess if you want to, we can take it more free form. I don't know.
ideally we'd be able to conclude on this. God, man, I really wanted to conclude on this. Yeah, yeah, that's disappointing. But
yeah,
maybe we can achieve something through the questions, or maybe we can take it a different direction if you'd like.
Let's ask questions, because I know we've been talking for 2 hours exactly.
Yeah.
So let's give the audience a voice, I think. Audience, guys and gals, and anyone in between. Hello. What do you think? Let's wait a bit for that.
Okay. Yeah.
I forgot. I had other points, but we can bring them up later. There's an interesting point about Robin Hood. Don't know if you saw. Did you see when he grilled the CEO Robin Hood?
No, I didn't see his reaction to that, but I can understand why he would have grilled Robin Hood for what they did.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised when I watched it. He didn't actually grill him. He asked him questions. He started. Actually, let me show you exactly what he said to begin with. Hang on. I'm gonna. Oh, is it working? Is it going to do the whole thing? Okay, Chrome tab. Okay, so it starts it by saying this. Actually, let me put on subtitles. So it starts off with him saying the people want an answer. They want to know the details and the truth, which is interesting. It's not that's his tough. That's where he starts off at his very toughest. But at that point, he's like, for the sake of the people, we want to know an answer, which is quite collectivistic. But what's interesting is that throughout this video, he's remarkably gracious. Like he says, yeah, I understand. I understand what might not be your fault. You may be pressured to do it, which we mean to find out who is making you do it. But he's not going on. He did not go for the throat at all. And that was interesting to me as well. Because what I expect for an LIE, I've seen it. When I think of LIEs in this sort of environment, they want to be exercising their extrovert sensation. They would be wanting to go for the throat as much as they could. Instead, it seems to me that Elon Musk actually starts off tough, in a way which I might start off tough. I might say I'm going to go and debate this guy, and then it becomes more of a discussion. And I think Elon saw that this guy wasn't comfortable. He clearly was pissing his pants. Like he was so scared about what's going on, very uncomfortable, very nervous, and he got quite a bit more, gentle with him over time. So there's another thing I just wanted to share. I thought was interesting. Okay, what have we got here? Questions. So first of all, we have. Oh yeah. Okay, we have Fate asking a question for you, Trey. Are you a day trader? I know you're just behind you.
Yeah, so no, I'm not a day trader. I share this office space with several roommates, and one of them is an LIE, and so he does trade. So that's hence the 3 monitor setup back here. That's the LIE that I have living in this space. So, and then so that's a lot of those things have also gone into what we talked about today, because it's very interesting. I told you that it's Damon, me, and then my girlfriend here too. So it's like we have 2 SLEs and 1 IEI, and then we have an LIE. So it's been a very interesting case study to see the different values between them. And when we've tried breaking it down, and actually it's very interesting because the differences are so subtle. Like, when one of us points out something that seems completely unreasonable on the opposing side, it's like when they bring it back, it's less, it's such a subtle distinction, and so it's actually been an interesting case study to live with someone that's in an environment that contrasts the already pre-established beta like culture, but yeah, so that answers the question and a little bit more. Getting a little bit laggy on me, Jack.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet's not. Oh, I guess it's. I'm glad it was happening. Well, not so glad happening now, but it's good it didn't happen when we were in full discussion mode. But okay, it's better now.
Yeah.
Better now. Yeah, I said that's very, very good intuition, Fate. Yeah, there is a trade there. It's not Trey.
Yeah.
No, but good intuition. That is what I would say is a classic Gettier case.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we have Alexander Hodgkin. You have persuaded me of vilely for Elon. Good talk. Thanks, Alexander. I appreciate it. Right. Now you got next. We got Upton Plates 48. Since Trey's an AI, I wonder if he's as intimidated by Musk's demeanor as he is by other people who are his supervisor.
I actually struggle with the word supervisor. I personally, eventually I want to work on terms and kind of make differing ones, but I don't really know if I agree with the word supervisor for that relation. I'd say that there's a lot of places where I've seen, not only in relation to me with LIEs, but also in other people's supervisor roles, where they're often supervising their supervisor in certain ways. And what I find is that with LIEs, I am often supervising like their environment. Like I'm a lot more aware of what's going on in the environment than they are, even though I already have a problem with that. I tend to be like, hey, like what are you doing? Like you know what I mean? So I think there are a lot of ways where that TE comes out and it's more frustrating than it is. It can be, depends on approach. And I think that's what is largely missing in the interaction is that, when my LIE friend makes suggestions, I've had to tell him like, look, if you give the suggestion to me like this, then I'll receive it, which is basically just as a suggestion. But sometimes he just likes to tell me what to do. And I hate that more than anything. Right. Like you don't tell me what to do. I'm sorry, but I'm not open to your ideas any longer. Like if you make a suggestion, I'll consider it. I'll dive into it and see if it's got merit. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really, it can kind of go either way sometimes, but I don't really know if I would call that a supervision relationship personally. You know what I mean? I know it's technically labeled that, but I would probably have named it something else because I don't feel intimidated by Musk. In fact, I admire him. Most of the things Musk does excite me because I am not very capable in regard to making things like that happen. And so when I can see someone who not only clearly has an understanding of how things are going to unfold, but can also execute on those ideas, it gets me excited. Right. So yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I also would say that if there's an area of socionics which I think needs more care and attention to defining how exactly the relationship works, and also relabeling if there's a more intuitive way of describing that concept, that phenomenon, I think the intertype relationships would be a prime candidate.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. But I think it's more important to make sure you've got the fundamentals down first, because if not, then that carries over into the next level,
Yep, exactly. What else? Fate goes, of course, all thanks. Welcome, Fate. Natalia goes, no questions, but I vote highly for Musk. Thanks, Natalia. Any LIE people? Everyone's been convinced of LIE who wasn't before, perhaps, or has always thought LIE and hasn't had their mind changed. It'd be interesting to see. Fate says, I've noticed during Musk's interviews, he is often responding than initiating, corresponding more of introverts, while people who initiate are often extroverts. Any thoughts? One thing I've noticed is that he gets quite matter of fact when he's in an interview environment, say with Joe Rogan. His manner is very sort of factual, very straightforward, quite muted in tone, right? Which looks quite extroverted logically. I've seen him change in other environments when he's more in control and seems more confident. Let's say in a sort of like that meme review video, which I
I could also show at some point. It's interesting. Personally, I think that's going between demonstrative and mobilizing. I know for myself, I switch between a more boring, matter-of-fact way of talking. I do that with my clients frequently. Whereas when I'm in show mode, I go into full-on extroverted ethics. That's when I'm at most confident, because I have control over the expression I'm giving off, and there aren't the same consequences. I'm just enjoying myself. So, yeah, I wonder, what do you think of this, Trey, about the initiating and responding?
I think I saw earlier that she mentioned that she thought he was an ILI. If I'm remembering correctly, I glanced over and saw that, which actually I thought for some time in the very beginning he might be ILI as well, because specifically I watched the interview with Jack Ma, which is hilarious if you haven't seen it. Have you seen that one?
I've seen it.
Jack Ma is so liberal, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of ideas or anything. He's just kind of oh, whatever with that stuff. And Elon's so focused on elaborating, creating this elaborate it was a really funny interview. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, there's a lot of NI here. That was my impression from that video. And so I actually thought for a little bit in the beginning that ILI made sense. But I will say that was a long time ago, and my understanding of socionics was way it was not as good. And it should have been obvious in my opinion that the SE was.
Pause.
Hello. Yeah, I don't know. It looks like we lost Jack to latency and shit.
Oh, dang.
Oh, there we go. I heard you say dang. You're coming back to us. Oh, it's just me. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and read another comment since Jack's out for a minute. Leia said, I'm leaning a little more towards ILE now, but I'm still on the fence about SI valuing points. I want to see more of an indication of valuing some sort of downtime. Yeah, downtime between spurts. Yeah, I don't see it either personally. I don't know. I can definitely. Here's what I will say. Right, I give credit that I do recognize why people have come to ILE as a conclusion. I just. I struggle with it. I'm definitely still on LIE side, but it's I don't know. I can see why people come to that conclusion. I was just responding to one of the comments while you were out.
Makes sense. Now,
Got some snacks.
I didn't turn off the internet to get dinner. Zara just came in and told me I was ridiculous and gave me pasta.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just playing.
I'm just okay. I do think though we should wrap up very soon. One, because the internet's getting worse, and it does get worse in that late at night at my parents' house.
Really?
I think that's probably why we're having this problem. I'm not sure why that's the case. I don't know at all. I can't explain it yet. Maybe it's decreasing.
Do you have that problem at your house too?
Yeah, density. Huh? What was that?
Do you have that problem? Do you have that problem at your house, or?
I have a problem at my parents' house, but that's where I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right.
Every night time it gets like this, and I have to get really close to the router for anything. But
darn.
Yeah, I'm in my sister's room. But is there anything else here? I personally, one thing I'll say about ILI that would make sense for what you're saying before about, is it extroverted logic serving introverted intuition? Or is it introverted intuition?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But I think the problem immediately becomes clear that the SE is way more obvious than the SI. So that would be the only issue with that typing, I think, or one of the biggest ones with that typing. But
I mean, I feel I've seen as I said, bits and pieces which you could very easily interpret as SI, I think, which would make sense as SI in terms of, having someone next to you on their pillow. Think about it in that way. It's quite an SI thing. That it's looking at love in terms of physical placement. And I say that from experience of SEIs. They will frequent SEIs want.
I know what you mean in terms of SEIs for sure.
Yeah, SEIs literally say, "Come here." Zara says to me, "Come here." She wants me right next to her, so that I'm in close physical proximity.
Right.
And when it comes to an ILE, right, in those moments when they're showing their suggestive function more, I could see that being when when you ask an ILE to talk about love, right, to talk about that companionship, and what does that mean for them, using that very concrete physical image, when delving into that weaker part, so defaulting to suggestive rather than deal with vulnerable for its own sake, I think that makes sense. I think it makes more sense than LIE talking about introvert ethics in terms of physical proximity and placement.
I wouldn't take that as a point. I don't think I would take that as a very strong point, but I will say that I acknowledge what you're saying in regard to SEIs. They're definitely they're like, oh, like I'll make you soup, or I'll do these things, like bring you a warm blanket or whatever. And it's like very clearly like using it's like physical happiness is how I think that, it's like joy from the little things,
I mean, I can count the number of points on their own. No, I would not base SI value on the points on their own together. And I can count them. It's that way of describing love. It's the fixation on certain aesthetic qualities, recurring again and again in his choice of life partner, in the hair, the blonde hair, for instance. It's the reaction to negative mood and the idea of things being hurtful. When he describes mood in a bad way, it's about it being harsh or emotional manipulation, or it's hurtful. Another thing, again, not strong in its own. If you go into also the focus on how he liked his car to be perfected, not about the cost efficiency. He felt it needed to be aesthetically right, and also how he's gone into designing his aesthetic cars. His was that electric pickup truck, and how that looked. Very much about pursuing some kind of aesthetic whole. There was another dang point, and it just jumped out of my head, which is annoying because that was the one I was trying to recount before you. Dang it. Okay, I'm gonna eat pasta until I remember.
It's like the equivalent for intuitives of like when sensing types like lose something and they know they put it somewhere. It's like, I know I always put it here every time. It's like lose an idea. It's the worst.
It's not another one which wasn't it, is that how he wanted essentially his wife to clean up his house, to do all the physical day-to-day things. He wanted that to be done. Like he felt that that's sort of your role. That's another thing. That's not the thing I was thinking. I was trying to remember and think of. I'm just trying to remember what it was. That's so annoying. I need to think about it. Any other questions? Just while I remember. Fate thinks could be LII. Let's see what else. Leia thinks he definitely has bold SE and FE. Fate was wondering about subtypes. I'm wondering about subtypes.
Yeah.
If there's a subtype,
I think a big part of that comes with like, there's a few different ways to address this. Like, I think one is priority. That's one of them, right? A lot of socionists engage with the concept of priority. I don't really know where I am in terms of, I haven't decided on if that's how I want to conceptualize that. But there's also focus. I think that people go through various phases where they're focusing on different aspects of who they are. And so in a lot of times, like there are some IEIs that are a lot more focused on their TI. And I think it's generally more likely for them to be focused on their TI. And maybe this is not, in my experience, the male types are usually like the male IEIs tend to be better with their TI for IEI. So, but I think that oftentimes subtypes become an issue because, in my opinion, you should be able to account for all of the different variations of a manifestation of an element in the definition. Rather than saying like, oh, this is NE in a way that is unusual, or this is this element's appearing in an unusual fashion. Like, I don't think that should be accounted for as a subtype to compensate. I think that you should just make sure your definition can accommodate all the different variation. In my opinion.
Okay, that was very nice and truffly.
The food, yeah. I considered bringing before we got on. I considered bringing a cup of ramen because I haven't eaten in a while. Yeah, but I was just like, I'll get it later.
Do something. Goodness. What time is it? Well, it's where it's
4:23.
4:30.
Actually, I don't think I've had anything at all today. Now that I think about it.
Oh, Trey, I'm starving you to death here.
No, it's okay. I'm really not hungry. I had coffee, so.
Oh,
yeah, I definitely should have eaten that. Yeah.
It's so bad. I'm trying to think of other.
Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. I did eat something today.
What?
My girlfriend. I said I did eat something today. My girlfriend made me an egg sandwich.
Oh.
Yeah. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So what were you gonna say?
I think I just remember two more examples. How he his attraction to the aesthetic of Gene Wilder's house, describing LV. Actually, it's much more extrovert intuition valuing. Actually, house and the idea of doors which led to nowhere, of the idea of all differently shaped drawers and doorknobs. I think it was doorknobs.
Yeah,
that was an interesting point. There was also crud. It's gone again. I remember. I forgot it again. Goodness.
Well, I mean, one thing I will say.
Something else is interesting.
Oh, did you find it?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I will say.
No, I think of one. Go.
All right. I think there's a little bit of lag. That's probably why that keeps happening. But yeah, I think I was going to say that in regard to the pillow thing, that's one reason I didn't really see that as a great example. Just because something was described using a pillow doesn't necessarily mean that was an essential part of like what he was looking for. So I think that's kind of an issue with that idea. Like, and plus, like, while yes, there's like details and things in terms of like sensory environment aren't going to be like a big part of like a LIE's awareness. It's still kind of like people are still going to reference objects when they explain things. Like they're not so oblivious that they don't know what like a cup is or whatever.
I'm also thinking about like consistency in sort of signature in terms of what he identifies as certain aesthetic qualities about himself, and not necessarily even in his clothes. He likes the sort of t-shirt or casual look now, but also is his love of the letter X. So examples, right?
Yeah, SpaceX.
X.com was the website of his second business, right? Eventually merged to form PayPal, I believe. He spent millions of pounds to purchase back that domain name because he said it had sentimental value to him. That same X appears in SpaceX, short for space exploration. It appears
on his cars, the Model X, and he actually what he did. He had a Model S, a Model E, Model X, Model Y.
Right. And
Sexy. Yeah. He, this is all very funny. He is charged with Grimes. Yes, he claims to have volunteered the A12 part. Right. But I think it wouldn't be surprising if he also volunteered the starting point of the X, or at least agreed to the name. That's because of the X.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I wonder why he's got an obsession with the letter X.
Yeah, it's like a signature thing for him. He puts X on things. Even one of his other sons was called Xavier.
Right. Yeah. And he actually admitted that was Charles Xavier. It was inspired by Charles Xavier.
Yeah. Goodness. But even like the X-A12, right? It is also an example. It's impractical. That there's no practicality to that name. That is a name purely of we're going to call our kids something really unique. And yes, Grimes had as much to do with that as Musk, I think.
Right.
But I think the idea is that normally there is one parent saying, no, I'm not calling our child this. Right? Zara won't let me call any child who may have Phineas. I want to call the child. She does not want to call any child Phineas. She's okay with Tobias. She's not okay with Phineas. So usually there's one parent who's the sensible one saying, no, we're not going to do that thing. But when you've got an ILE and perhaps an EIE together, yes, that would make sense. I think an LIE would say no to X-A12.
Yeah.
Extra 12, right?
I have one of these too, actually. I have an obsession with the name Axe, because it's definitely not a normal or common name, but the name Axe, in my opinion, is super cool because it represents in my view, it represents separation and ego, right? Like being separated from things. So I think that's a really cool, really down to earth name. You know what I mean? But of course, I doubt anyone's going to be okay with that name.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, and when you look at, say, Jeff Bezos, right? He calls his space project Blue Origin.
Right. Yeah. To remind us of home.
Yeah, and he called Amazon. The reason why, not any special reason. He just found it's first in the alphabet because it begins with A, so it will appear more. So that there isn't that saying I'm expressing myself approach with his choices and decisions. I think it's
right.
The last thing I want to talk about was we haven't really talked about introverted logic. We haven't.
No, we haven't. I did have a point pulled up for it, but go ahead with what you're going to say.
I was going to say that the point about how Elon Musk learns, I think it was something we talked about in that debate. Damon was talking about how he absorbs lots and lots of facts. Yes, he takes in factual information, but an important quote from Musk himself was, here it is. I got it right here. Let me just share my screen. Share screen. Come on. I think it's that one. Yes, it is. Right here. According to Elon Musk, it is important to view knowledge as a sort of semantic tree. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles, i.e. the trunk and big branches, before you get into the leaves or details, or there is nothing for them to hang on to. Now, it's also something which Justine said about Musk in her TED Talk, that it's about getting to the underlying principles of the things you're grasping to know. I don't think that, Musk studies, right? Of course he studies. He needs to put information to his head. But I think he definitely uses the shortcut of studying, of getting the underlying principle, and therefore seeing the different way in which the underlying principle could be applied. So I'm going to get rid of that. So I think the introvert logic is there. It's not on show nearly as much, or even I think it is. Like another point is political views, right? And I go back to Jeff Bezos. If you type in Jeff Bezos' political views, what do you get on Wikipedia? You get a list of examples of where accounts have shown that his company has donated, or his fund has donated to Democrats or Republicans in this situation or that situation, right? You'd have to delve to find out this. Whereas Musk is very open about what he politically thinks. And it's very clear he believes in a sort of direct democracy. He wants Mars to run on a direct democracy. He believes in freedom. He very much as opposed the COVID-19 lockdowns. Again, this is all, I think, ideological position taking. He's even said he wouldn't be willing to take the vaccine at one point, which I'm not sure whether necessarily true or not, but it does seem to me to be, I'm buying into this way of thinking, and that's how I'm responding to that question being posed to me. And then at some point he said, "Oh, can we not talk about it? Can we talk about something else?" Because the mood was getting a bit uncomfortable, perhaps, and he didn't, So, yeah, I think introverted logic is there. I just think it's not out there in the front and bold. I think it is, though, playing a role in shaping his motivations and decision making. I don't think it's being ignored. And I also think that as a cautious function doesn't need to be out there so obviously, and especially in a job which is to do with engineering over, say, maths or philosophy or intellectual thought.
Yeah, I think the points are less clear for this one. Most of his, like when you look at, he sent, I'm sure you remember referencing this in the past, when he sent emails out regarding like what he was expecting from his employees. There were rules, but a lot of those rules were kind of like, if the system is wrong, don't follow it. That was a consistent theme. So it's kind of like he made rules not to like do things that you consider to be dumb. Like, he mentioned here, like, he said, he said, follow logic, not rules. That's literally one of his rules.
Yeah.
In general, always pick common sense to your guide. Following a company rule is obviously ridiculous in a particular situation, then the rule should change. Right.
Yeah. The thing is, what SLE or ILE would disagree with that?
I think yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that when you look at like SLE, like when you look at a lot of these, so let's go through them because I think that'll bring a little bit more clarity.
Yeah.
Regardless of the one, but it says like there's one rule says dodge big meetings, excessive meetings, are the blight of big companies always get worse over time. Please get out of large meetings unless you're certain they're providing value to the whole audience, in which can keep them very short. Ditch, leave a meeting if you're not contributing. It says drop the jargon, communicate directly irrespective of hierarchy. I don't know if this article covers it, but I do remember one of his rules was to literally be rude if and step on the toes of others within the organization. And I remember that was the result of the products overlapping in terms of design. So like I remember the people designing the actual shell of the car created a compartment for the battery, but also the people doing the interior of the car also created a compartment, I think. And so it was like something like that. And so they had a double compartment. And so as a result, he asked them to be rude and step on other people's toes and don't worry about, like hurting other people's feelings or, just get in their business, find out what you need to find out. Don't feel apologetic for it. Which I think is a little bit strange. If you think about how TI types are usually looking, like you can still get the same thing accomplished where you're still holding that courtesy. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, and Leia also said, I think rules can tend to be a TI buzzword, which is definitely true.
Yeah, it tends to be a TI buzzword. There's also worth thinking, what exactly is the thing going on when someone tells you to follow the rules? It's that these people who I don't know, for instance, usually it's people who I don't know, I haven't met, I don't understand where they're coming from. Whatever they are, I don't know if they know what they're talking about. I don't know if they are talking what we're talking about. Either way, they have come together to decide how I'm meant to be doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and sure, an LIE would be frustrated by that, right? But I think any high extroverted logic type, whether demonstrative or leading, would similarly be frustrated by that. That there are these rules, I don't understand why they're there, but suddenly I have to tailor what I think is best to what is set out in these said rules. Like, I mean, I can point to so many examples of SLEs who broke all the rules because, and it's not because they didn't understand the rules were there. It's not that they just shattered things because they were inconsistent in their thinking. It's that the rules were, these are dumb rules. I'm going to take over. I'm going to create my own rules. And I think ILEs also can do it, take a very similar sort of rule breaking approach if they don't respect the source of these rules. If they don't think it makes any sense to them, to their own TI. You know, they're going to take it more into their own hands. And when it comes to, the being rude part, I get it. LIEs are more likely to be seen to be sort of rude when they're frustrated in that sort of environment. But I don't think they go out of their way to be rude. The idea of being rude itself, I would say, is odd for an LIE to say. This is the thing. This is where it gets weird as well, right? Because we often think when you're dealing with your superego functions, that someone would say, right, no, don't do buzzword. Do the opposite of buzzword, right? Don't be polite, be rude. As in, politeness is the FE virtue, whatever it is, and we're going against it actively. Instead, I don't think that's how LIEs phrase them, what they're actually doing, how they talk about what they're doing. When I talk to LIEs, instead I think, okay, I know there's this thing where I have to be sort of polite around this sort of person. Well, I know I've been told I'd be polite with this sort of person, but that person is an absolute arse. And if I'm not, and I just want to tell them what I think of them. So I'm finishing soon, and they just get angry in that moment, and they'd say, "Look, this is what is fact. These are the facts. They don't care about that. These are the actual facts." I wouldn't say that they ever tell someone just to be rude, because an EIE could be rude, and any extroverted ethics type, especially one that's low in introvert sensation, can be deliberately rude to provoke. And they'll say, I'm being rude for a reason. But when it comes to a type which is extroverted ethics in the superego, for them it's recognizing, oh, there's this thing called being rude or being polite. And I guess if it's my role, I have to sort of watch out for it and be quite careful, except when I'm, pissed off. Or if I'm a vulnerable function, extrovert ethics, like rude, what is rude? What is that about? I don't know. I don't use that term. I don't talk of it in that term, in that way of speaking. So that even that is strange. And in a way it looks like it's LIE pastiche, but it looks like a non-LIE's view of an LIE. It looks like an extroverted ethics valuing type view of what being an LIE is. And it makes you wonder again, this idea of Musk putting on the suit, becoming this person he had to be. I had to convince people I'm a serious person. I need to be both the engineer and the suit. That he's taken this idea of the businessman, the corporate boss who gets things going for working at high efficiency, whatever that is, and picked up all these ideas of what that's about and is just giving that out as the advice. You have to be this way. You have to be rude. You have to step on people's toes. You have to work every day. I don't care if you're not seeing a family. You have to work every day. You're not in it for the company. Which again, LIEs in real life, they want to be able to provide for their close families. They're part of their efficiency. Would an LIE actually want to work in that environment where they're not expected to be able to see their family and people closest to them? I don't think an LIE would actually put up with that, ironically.
Putting up with what? Sorry, that last part. Did you hear me?
Yeah, he now.
Yeah, I said that last part. What was that again? You said you didn't think they'd put
Yeah,
up with
I
it?
say I don't think an LIE employee of Musk would actually appreciate their working environment.
Yeah, well, I don't think so either.
No.
I think it sounds pretty grueling.
I could imagine actually an EIE putting up with that environment, actually.
An EIE putting up with, wait, you said, oh, so you're saying if the employee was an LIE, you don't think that they'd put up with the environment?
No. EIE would. I think even an IEI could, to some degree. I don't.
If people are rude to me all the time,
okay, assuming they
have,
huh?
I said, I don't know. If people are rude to me all the time, I don't know. I think I would get really unfocused from what I was doing and really focused on everybody around me.
Oh.
You know, but
no, sure. If people were rude to you, but if being told to be rude itself, that is what I mean. An EIE could actually, if that became the culture, I think an EIE could get on board with it.
Right.
But also what I was saying is about the EIE in that environment being expected to not see your family, to dedicate yourself entirely to the cause going ahead.
Yeah, that's intense.
I think it's intense. It's going all in to some degree. So it becomes more beta in some ways, even getting gamma. But it looks like gamma, but it's sort of more. It reeks of pseudo gammaism. That's well, I just made it up, but
pseudo gammaism. Yeah. I can kind of see your point in regard to how you kind of avoided that word, but it kind of does feels different, but I don't know. I know you gotta get going, so we can wrap it up if you'd like to. But I do kind of want to do a plug on my own channel, even though I really need to do a lot more videos, need to redo them. There's also sessions on there, so Trey 4L would be the channel. Put a link on there or something. Awesome.
Yes, I will do that. Send me the. Well, actually, if it's just your channel, I'll just stick that in the comment section. Well, in the description box, I'll do that. Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. It's been good talking with you.
Thank you so much for coming on and subjecting yourself to me. Just.
I mean, hey, it was fun. It was interesting.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well, and it was fun. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we can do more videos in the future.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
yes, please.
I'm down.
Anything you want to talk about on here, just let me know. We'll do it.
All right. Sounds good. Cool. All right. Have a good one.
And thank you, everyone else, as well. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.